Next, we're going to go one level deeper into the architecture behind it all. So joining us are Kevin Heinlein, Principal Strategic Advisory here at Staffbase, and Dean Barker, Director of Strategic Engagement at Staffbase. They'll explore how to treat your intranet as a knowledge API, the structured foundation AI needs to deliver trusted, permission-aware answers and share practical guidance you can start applying right away. Kevin, Dean, over to you.
Thanks, Lauren, and hello, everyone. Hey, Dean, how are you?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. This is your Staffbase South Dakota, Germany connection here.
It is.
So super excited to do this, and excited to do this with you, Dean, as well. And I hope we can stay on time. Everyone has been so perfect on time. We have a lot to go through, so
we're about to ruin that streak. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I think so too. But no. Honestly, very excited about this topic, and also to dive a little bit deeper into what the previous speakers have framed already so greatly. And when Dean and I got together to start working on this topic about 2 months ago, we were coming together in a couple of virtual sessions and starting our research into this topic. And it was mind-blowing to me, at least to some extent, what we found out and some of the aha moments we had together while reading deeper into the whole AI thing and what this means for intranets in our industry. And one thing that really stood out, and that's what I want to kick us off with, is AI is not magic. Sorry to break it to you. It might feel like magic a lot of times, but ultimately it is technology, right? It is, yes, very advanced technology, but this is certainly something that Dean and I came to understand. This is really something we want to understand deeply, and hopefully today we can give you a good level of understanding as well to what it is that makes it feel so magic, but ultimately also what you just have to know in terms of how it's going to influence the content that we're creating and also how our end users on our intranets and apps are going to be interacting with it. One guy, and Dean, you made me aware of his existence. One guy who would definitely also underline that statement that AI is no such thing as magic is Sir Arthur Clarke. If you haven't heard of him, go look him up. The Wikipedia article describes him as a futurist, science fiction writer, undersea explorer, among other things. So
I'm deeply concerned, Kevin, that you were just now learning of his existence.
I know you were.
I'm glad I was able to give you some culture, but wow, you're a bit behind.
Yeah, I'm catching up. I'm trying to catch up. But yeah, he would truly underline that statement. But what's happening is, and I see this in conversations every single day, but also in my own use of AI, we are humanizing AI a lot. And the term that describes this is anthropomorphism, which is basically attaching humanizing things, and that's also something that can be done with animals or pets or whatsoever, but it's happening with AI, right? So this is something I found from Niels and Norman on this, that the 4 degrees of AI anthropomorphism, and I think we're all guilty to be to a couple of those degrees, right? I think we're all being polite to AI sometimes, which is, I think it's okay. But I mean, this goes on and on. I mean, I think it was just recently that in Japan, a 32-year-old woman has married her AI chatbot, right? So this is going way beyond treating this as a technology. And
I always feel the need to say thank you when it fixes a problem, but I read somewhere that people saying thank you to AI wastes like $100 million a year in computing power just to generate a response to the thank you. But I feel guilty. I feel bad when I don't.
Yeah, same. And this is not, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. There's a million other reasons why you should not do this. And not only because it creates unnecessary waste of prompting and all the data that's needed and the computing power that's behind that. But ultimately, what I wanted to say is that this is just advanced technology, right? But we have to understand and leverage it. So what Dean and I want to cover here today is that even though it is just technology, it is apparently exciting piece of technology that's currently seeing hyper adoption. I'm sure many of you have seen this graph before. It's also a couple months old, so by now I'm sure ChatGPT has surpassed 1 billion users, and this is really something that we have to take into account as communication, HR, IT professionals when we own platforms that touch every single employee in our organizations, because it is highly likely that they are using AI in their daily lives. So at some point, it is going to come to our business systems as well. And Frank mentioned that earlier as well. We're going to see these kind of technologies coming, and the AI chatbot is not going to replace our jobs. It's also not going to replace our intranets, but it's going to deeply change how our employees are interacting with our contents. All the contents that have ever existed, that we have created over the past couple of years, as well as all the content that we're going to create going forward. And there's always going to be an interdependence between that chatbot interface that's going to become more and more relevant. And that's really no matter if you're using the Staffbase Navigator going forward, or Copilot, or whatever kind of bespoke chatbot technology you're implementing in your organization. It'll always require some input, right? So the structured and relevant information that it gets from, for example, your structured intranet topic pages is something that is really crucial for it to have some knowledge it can use. But also, it is very important for the topic page to still exist, right, as a trusted space that employees can still go to and verify information. Because otherwise, you would probably get a lot of screenshots from your employees from that chatbot conversation asking you whether the answer is correct, and they can trust that information. And this slide, Frank had that slide earlier, right? So if we now think about how can we make our how can we think of our intranet as a knowledge API? How can we create better context for AI to really drive good quality output as well? Then it takes a lot, right? And if we think 20 years ago. And I know, Dean, you've worked with CMSs long before I started. The quality of the context that a chatbot could get from the systems back then wasn't a lot, right? There were document libraries and team rooms, and the context that those systems gave truly wasn't made for AI conjunction. And luckily, versioning has become less of a thing, right? And we've moved quite far from back then. We've optimized our platforms a lot, also for humans, right? We've introduced things like modern design patterns and templates and things that made it easier for humans to consume content, which is already helpful for an AI. To everything that's better structured, et cetera, is also helpful for the AI to consume it better. But to have a fully AI optimized context, it takes much more. And that's what we want to do a little deep dive on in the next 30 minutes with you. So what Dean and I will cover are basically what we call the 3 pillars of AI optimized content. And we're going to cover a couple of questions, and we're going to start very easy on a high level. First of all, does the relevant content for employees even exist? And then once it exists, we'll have to understand, okay, how do employees, but how do especially machines search for that content, right? What's the context around it? How does that process look like technically? And ultimately, what does the content look like, right? So we're going to be ultimately talking about content strategy, as well as search and retrieval and content structure. And I'm going to be starting to focus on a little bit on content strategies, so diving a little bit deeper into what is actually the most relevant content for your internal audiences. And there's a little sub-discipline under content strategy, which is context engineering. I'm also going to be talking about that briefly. And then Dean will take us even a level deeper on the technical side of things, helping us understand what search and retrieval is, what it is, what's the non-magic or magic behind RAG, and ultimately also then help us understand how to structure content for both AI and employees. So kicking us off with content strategy, and starting with context engineering. When I started talking to our clients about AI optimized content and context, and trying to improve their platform for AI. Some of the things that always came to mind were, oh yeah, we have to train AI on how it's supposed to behave, right? Our tone and maybe all the words we're using. And I said, yes, that's a good step, right? That's definitely something that's helpful. So you have to train your AI first of all, because it doesn't know a lot about your company, right? Frank mentioned that earlier. It knows a lot about the world, but it doesn't know anything about your company, right? It has some training data, and that training data is most likely relatively outdated. I know, Dean, you'll cover that later as well. So you'll have to train the AI you're using a lot about your company, right? And that it goes way beyond just telling AI how it's supposed to behave, or what kind of tone it's supposed to use, or how many jokes it's supposed to make in interacting with your employees. So context engineering is going to become a more important discipline in setting up AI within your organization, and something that you'll have to start doing and creating probably a set of master documents that you're continuously evolving and maintaining, that act as sort of a system prompt, if you will, to whatever AI you're using, constantly explaining to the AI what kind of business it is that it represents, right? And how does your business make decisions? What counts as true, what's not? What is AI approved information? What is not? And specifically for whom is which information true? Right, regional specificality is super important, because the more metrics organized you are, the more you operate across different countries, different business units, etc., etc. All of this is super crucial to have AI understand this before you basically let it go loose and have it interact with your employees. So keep that in mind. Context engineering is going to become much more important as soon as you start rolling out AI in your organization. Super little excursus. I don't want to go deeper into this, but also a concept that Frank developed is something that we call durable writing. So this is even going as far as I'm trying to understand, how do I actually write content? How do I actually write news articles, pages, in terms of which words do I have to use for it to be actually understood and interpreted correctly by AI? So I think we're going to share the link to the blog article in the chat with you. Feel free to also scan that QR code or follow up after the session with this. But this is really interesting as well. So really trying to understand also how to write content better for AI to make the right meaning out of it. But what I wanted to land on here, and coming back to the initial question I had, does the content even exist, right? Because if we want to move to a world where we have great tools like a chatbot, like a navigator that our employees can just pop up on their desktop or take out of their pocket on their phones and ask relevant questions, then we need to understand what kind of questions do they have, right? What are the answers that we want to answer, and where does the information exist? Is it in the platform itself, connected sources, your HR systems, your SharePoints, etc., etc.? So there's a lot of things to consider. And especially what I wanted to highlight here is typically most companies that I've spoken about this topic think of their typical desk worker questions, right? But this is not the reality of a lot of companies out there, and especially those of you who work in organizations with frontline employees. They're very unlikely to ask something like, where can I find our corporate slide deck? Right? That's nothing that a frontline employee would ask in a chatbot, or what's our company mission, right? So those are not the types of answers that you get. Even though the workshops that I had with our customers, and I asked, what do you think your top 10 employee questions are? They came up with these kind of questions, right? And that's just not the reality of frontline workers. So they're more likely to ask things like, my safety certification expires next month. How do I renew it, right? So it's more operational use cases. It's much more, down to the frontline reality and their actual day-to-day and what they do, the processes they touch, than the corporate typical desk worker queries and questions that they would have. One custom example here, and that's also something where, for example, our platform could could help out is look into search analytics, right? So if you're currently using Staffbase or any other CMS intranet platform, if you have search analytics, that's a great starting point and a great source to understand what your employees are currently searching for and what the typical questions are they're typing into the search bar if there's no chatbot. And one of our customers figured out that actually uniform is the top search query here. And the problem was that there was just one generic policy that didn't apply to all the different variations of that policy for all the different stores. And also, and since that wasn't relevant information, it only gave generic answers. They only found generic answers to their question. So they went away and asked their manager anyway. Right. So that's a great starting point. So really try to think of your frontline employees and the day-to-day they have, their operational use cases. If you're in healthcare, things like shift swapping, these kind of things. That's really something that your employees do on a daily basis, right? So also another thing from the conversations we have with our customers, most use cases that come up at the top of your mind is, oh yeah, I want to ask my chatbot, how many vacation days do I have left? And then I can book my vacation. And then I asked them, great, how often do your employees actually do that, right? And if you're in the US, how often are your employees taking PTO, right? Once or twice a year. So that's not really gonna move the needle. Yes, it's a cool use case if they can do that without having to go to a very old school HAS. They can just do it via chat, but it's not gonna make your employees a lot more productive. So you got to think of those use cases that are happening every single day, right? Those use cases at scale. And that's really then also going to deliver value, right? So if you think of that use case here a little bit further, that's really going to help you with some top line operational KPIs you have as well, right? So for example, in healthcare, decreasing your time to fill open shifts and ultimately, hopefully also the amount of money you have to spend on agency labor. And this is true for no matter which vertical you work in. So really find those marginal gains, right? So if you can think of those use cases, and they will then add up, right? We're not talking about 30% changes, 50% kinds of changes of any KPIs. We're really talking about small little details, but within processes that happen, like I said, at scale, things that happen across your 80% of your workforce every single day, multiple times a day. Those are the margins that you should look for. If you can apply AI into those processes, those margins will really add up and unlock tremendous value for your organization. And just, I'm gonna not go through those, but this is gonna be in the follow-up for you. Just a couple of more exemplary of those service-driven questions. They are relatively generic. I'm sure if you go specific down to your vertical, your industry, or your company, they're gonna be even more specific. But this is an example of typical questions that we see, especially frontline users asking. There are also some desk worker examples in here, right? So this is not about a corporate slide deck. This is not about the latest CEO news, but this is about compliance and processes and benefits, etc. This is what has to be part of your content strategy, and you have to make sure that this content and the answers to those kind of questions exist within your platform. Before I hand you off to Dean to take us a level deeper, I wanted to recommend you to go to LinkedIn and follow my friend John Wernfeld. Great guy and advocate on all things data governance and foundations. He posts great memes on almost a daily basis, basically underlining and doubling down on this statement Frank's session also had earlier, right? Great content is great, but we still have to make sure that not only we give AI enough context, but we also take care of our data and governance, right? We have to clean up our databases. We have to make sure that there's no conflicting information in our platforms, because ultimately we're going to have the same problems, the same data problems, just at accelerated speed. Right, and this is another meme from him, right? Ultimately, if you only put shiny AI on top, but we have crumbling infrastructure underneath, then it's all not going to work out. So we have to continue to prioritize the foundation. And one of the words from knowledge management that's been around for, gosh, probably longer than 20 years is gardening. right? Content gardening, intranet gardening, that's going to be something that you'll have to start doing. Luckily, AI will also be able to help you to some extent, but there is going to be some manual work surely involved for all of you. So gardening is super, super important, which is why I wanted to close with one of my favorite memes. If you think of a garden, right, and then try to think of what your intranet might look like, we all think our intranet looks like this, right? Beautiful, tidied up, everything in its place. But actually, reality looks a bit different, right? I think this is what actually most of our intranets still look like. A bit messy, and yeah, in a garden like this, you will have to be exceptional at searching and retrieving information, right? And this is your keyword, Dean. Tell us more about search and retrieval and the non-magic behind RAG.
Sure. Some of you mentioned in the chat the beeping sound that you heard while Kevin was talking. Kevin, I'm not sure if you could hear that, but there was an audible beep. And we figured out what it is. Kevin is actually a robot, and he is low on battery. So that's what was causing the beeping sound.
Sorry for that.
I am fully charged, so away we go. I'm going to be talking about a little more technical topics than Kevin was. When Kevin and I kind of divided that up, we thought, well, Kevin will talk about like the content strategy part, like making sure the content is there. And I'll talk about the more technical stuff. I am an engineer by background, so I really kind of dug into this at a technical level. And the first thing I'm here to tell you is that AI probably does not work the way you think it works. Because a lot of what I came up with, Kevin and I were maybe a little surprised to find out. I do want to baseline something. It's important to baseline here is that we talk about AI as like a generic concept, but actually AI is kind of a big stack of concepts when you unpack them. So I just had this up here, and I don't mean for this to be pedantic, but when people say AI, they could mean many different things that kind of live inside the larger banner of AI. AI is kind of the largest construct, and then a smaller construct inside that, kind of a subset of the field of AI, is what's called machine learning or ML. And then a smaller subset inside that is what's called generative AI or Gen AI. And then a smaller subset inside that is what's called an LLM or a large language model. A large language model is the thing that enables AI, what we anthropomorphize as AI, to generate text. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But so I'm going to use the word AI. I'm going to use the word LLM. I sort of mean the same thing. We're actually using large language models generally that we kind of refer to as AI. But here's a myth. Let's start with a myth that almost everybody gets wrong. The myth is that AI is constantly being updated with the new information. So the idea is that you have a prompt and you send it into this large language model of this AI engine, and it is constantly being updated up to the minute with new information. And so it's going to give you instant information based up to the minute. And that's just not true. It's just not how it works. Here's a fact. AI models, LLM models, large language models, cannot be updated or retrained or incrementally trained. We've kind of been ruined for this, I think, by the Googlebot, right? The Googlebot, this is from Google's own kind of documentation. Look, they even have like a little spider there hanging from the thing because the Googlebot is constantly crawling the web. And people who've worked in SEO for years are kind of used to the concept that the Googlebot will visit their site, get the new information, and incorporate it into its engine. And for a long time, the Googlebot, Google in general, was really the nearest thing we had to AI. And so we kind of got ruined by that. Like if you even go to Google's doc, you can see that they show you this is how to get Google to recrawl your URLs. And the implication there is we are going to incrementally update our index that for many people constituted like AI. But that's not how large language models work. Large language models are trained and released. You need to think of a large language model as an application. Like you have Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word, I don't know, 97. I'm dating myself here. And then it was updated, and they released a new version, Microsoft Word 2000 or whatever. And it was pretty much static until it updated. I'm going to give you an example just to prove this point. This was just a news article from a week ago. Is that Google released Gemini 3.1 Pro. This is a new version of the Gemini LLM. So this was a big announcement. They released it. They told you all the new features it has. And then I researched. I was like, how much does it cost to create one of these? And you'd be pretty stunned. This is maybe a little bit old, but look at that last row. Gemini Ultra, which was an LLM released by Google, took almost $200 million in computing power alone to generate. I tried to get an accurate count on how long it takes to generate, but it's in the order of months. So these models are trained and released, and there's a delay. Like, they're only trained up to a certain amount of time. Now, the question is, how can we get updated information about them? If I asked ChatGPT today, like, who won the gold medal in hockey at the Olympics, it would probably be able to tell me. And the question is how does that work? Because the reality is that specific AI models are largely static. The large language model that you send your prompt into and get output from actually doesn't change until a new model is released. The technology that, as a content creator, you need to be concerned with is something called RAG, which is a terrible acronym. RAG, nothing called RAG could possibly be good. But RAG actually stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And I'm willing to bet that every instance you're using of AI is using what's called a RAG model somewhere in the background. And to explain how this works, I need to explain another concept. And that concept is what's called prompt injection. The prompt is what you send in to an AI engine. So when you ask an AI engine a question, you are giving it a prompt. What you don't know behind the scenes is that the prompt you give it is likely being modified before it's sent into the large language model. Something is adding information to that prompt before it's being sent in. What the AI engine sees is probably not what you typed. It's what you typed plus a bunch of other stuff. And this is, and Kevin alluded to this when he talked about context engineering. This is what's called the context window of an AI engine. The context window is your prompt plus a bunch of other information that is sent in with your prompt behind the scenes that you don't see. And I'm going to show you how this kind of works. In many cases, what you don't realize is that the answer to your question is actually being found and sent in with your prompt. I have running on my local machine, this is when I really started to geek out a bit, but running on my local machine, I have an LLM called Llama. And it runs completely on my local machine. So it's not a service, not updated by anyone else. It is completely 100% of my control. And I'll show you what I did. It's called a llama. Their logo is a llama. I'm not sure what that's all about. But, I opened up a brand new session of a llama and I asked it, what's my favorite color? And its response was, I'm happy to help. However, I'm a large language model. I don't have any prior knowledge about you or your preferences. It was basically saying, dude, we just met. I don't know anything about you. So this is what I did. In addition to asking what my favorite color is, I sent in some information. One of the pieces of information was my favorite color. My name is Dean. My favorite color is green. I'm 54 years old. I have 3 children. I live in South Dakota. I drive a Jeep. Now, what is my favorite color? And it came in and says, your favorite color is green. Well, of course I said your favorite color is green. I literally just told it. Now, what's interesting is that many times when you use an LLM, when you ask a question of AI, that paragraph at the top, which gave it all that information about me, that's being sent in behind the scenes that you don't even know about. It's being sent in with your prompt. And behind the scenes, this is what your AI engine is doing. It's literally reading the information that you want out of the information that's sent it. I did a little more experimenting with this. I asked it, what's the most recent event you know about? And it came back, it was very honest. My training data only goes up to 2021. So my knowledge of events is limited to what was available in the public domain by that time. And so I thought I'd give it a test. I looked for something that happened after 2021. And once was, I'm a huge fan of James Bond. And there was a James Bond reality show that came out in 2022. So here's what I did. I went out to the James Bond Wikipedia page. I copied in 7,579 words of context. I basically copied the entire Wikipedia page for James Bond. And then at the bottom, I said, now, what was the name of the James Bond themed reality show? When was it released and by whom? And you see it gave me the right answer. It's called 007 Road to a Million, released by Amazon Prime Video in 2022. Now, the only way it knew that, remember, it's training it only goes up to 2021. The only reason it knew that is because I sent it the information. I injected the information into my prompt. And what's interesting, just a side note in this, your context window is actually limited. different engines have different amounts of information they can keep in the context window that they can use to help answer your question. And the first few times I tried this, it couldn't give me the right answer. And I couldn't figure out why it couldn't give me the right answer. And then when I went into the settings, I realized that my context window was very small. So it couldn't read the whole 7,579 words of information. So I maxed out the context window, and suddenly it could keep all that information in context. And then I thought, well, why not just run max context? Why doesn't anyone just run a massive context? I found out about 5 minutes later when my computer started crawling, and I found out the AI engine was using 25 gigabytes of RAM. That's why context windows are smaller than you think. And this is going to matter in just a second when I talk to you about how RAG engines start passing your information in. Just understand there is a context window that includes a bunch of background information that you don't see, plus your prompt, and those windows are generally limited. You can't put like the entire text of Wikipedia in there. So this is really what happens on your intranet when someone is searching it. They're asking, how many vacation days do I get? Behind the scenes, what the RAG engine in your AI implementation is doing is it's searching for the answer. It's finding the answer, and it's passing it into the prompt. Their prompt is being modified. And look, it's being modified here with the sentence, employees get 20 days of paid vacation per year, and then your prompt is being passed in. And so now what AI is doing, of course it can give the answer. The answer is right there. And it doesn't matter when it was trained. It doesn't matter if it knows anything specific about your company, because you're giving it the answer with the prompt. This is how prompt injection works. And this is how retrieval augmented generation works. Someone earlier mentioned Google Gemini and their concept of gems. And I went and I found this. This is from Google's documentation, how gems work. You can create a gem. And what you're doing is you can give it a tone and a role and some rules to use whenever it answers your question. Behind the scenes, you probably can realize this by now. What's happening behind the scenes is this information is just being passed in with your prompt. So if you tell it to be brief and witty, what that means is being passed in every single time with your prompt. And that's how prompt injection works. So what happens is if you are getting great results out of an AI engine, it's using two things together, both a large language model and a RAG database. And the RAG database is all the content from your organization that is being injected into the prompt and then sent to an LLM. These two things are working together. And this was when this first came up, I was like, but why? Why are we using an LLM? Like, if we have the answer, let's just give it to them. The fact is that our current usage of AI, the current contemporary usage of AI, is really not AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It's not reasoning at all. It's just what I would qualify as research and writing. You're passing in a bunch of data. It's sifting through that to find the answer. And then it's writing some intelligent response about the answer. It's not doing anything magic. It's not reasoning. It's literally just, a friend of mine once called AI spicy autocomplete. And it reminds me of a party game, right? So a party game where people write a sentence. Somebody says this, and somebody says game, and somebody else says is, and somebody else says dumb. What we're doing in this kind of party game that probably no one has ever actually played, you're creating a sentence by adding words. And that's really what your LLM is doing. You're passing in all that information, and based on that, it's just writing output based on that. Here's the good news, because this sounds super cynical, right? Like Kevin said, AI is not magic. We're kind of pulling back the curtain on it. But this is the good news. All your expertise in SEO still matters. If you're really good at SEO, you're really good at writing search-focused content, fantastic. You are still really, really far down the road. We'll go back to this slide. The bad news, AI is still not magic. And I don't know, maybe that's good news, maybe that's bad news. But if you're really good, have great content, and are good at writing search engine optimized content, congratulations, you're pretty far down the road. So how do we structure this content? And I'm gonna take a little tangent here. I have 6 minutes. I'm being warned that I'm running out of time. But this is the era I came on. I got on the web in 1985. It was invented in 93. I was online by 95. And this is the world I came from, where you would put together pages for a particular resolution, because we all had super small monitors. We had these CRTs, like 15 and 17-inch CRTs. And I remember we used to design for 800 by 600 resolution. And then monitors got bigger, and we made the big step to design for a larger resolution. And then smaller and bigger monitors appeared. Suddenly, the range of monitors that we had to support was huge. And that gave birth to what they called responsive design. And what responsive design was a breaking down of design into smaller elements that the browser could then rearrange, whether it was wide, whether it was narrow, it could rearrange them in different formats. What you were doing is you would pour your design into a container, and your design would take the shape of that container. And so really that was a way of visual adaptability. That's what responsive design fundamentally was, adapting a design to different ways of looking at it, whether in a small screen or a large screen. I think AI is the same thing as this, but just for cognitive capability. Whereas responsive design in different browser sites has rearranged your designs to fit, that's what AI is going to do. AI is fundamentally going to rearrange your designs to fit the cognitive output it needs it to. When responsive design became a thing, the concept of design systems became a big deal. Suddenly we were talking about smaller components that were like mixed and matched and rearranged. And I think we're moving into the world of responsive content. We're moving into a world where content is going to be in smaller components and it's going to be remixed and rearranged by AI. AI really synthesizes answers from small, discrete units of content. And what I'll get back to is Frank's article, which the link is in the chat, and I would encourage you to read this. Frank Wolf, one of our founders, has come up with this concept of durable writing, how to make your meaning survive AI. And I love that phrase, how to make it survive AI. Responsive design was fundamentally is how do we get your design to survive mobile phones, right? That's what we're doing with the concept of durable writing. This is how to write and structure your content in such a way that it can make sense when it's reinterpreted by AI, because this is really what happens is your RAG engine will chunk the content. It will divide it into smaller chunks and inject those with the prompt. So what you really need to start doing is start looking at your you need to start looking at your content as smaller self-contained units, not only smaller self-contained units, but smaller self-contained units that don't really beat around the bush. You need to look at your content, especially your internal content, as really a collection of facts. And how can those facts kind of be rearranged to tell a larger story or a larger narrative? This is what you don't want. This was from Employee Handbook, page 1 of 122. You do not want this. What you really want is something like this. If we have our human resources policy, you really want to get each one of those in separate chunks. You want to get them in separate URLs. You want to get them broken up so an AI engine can synthesize them individually, inject them into prompts as needed. If somebody's asking about recruiting and hiring standards or workplace conduct and professionalism, you want to make sure your RAG engine has that fact, that set of facts in a smaller unit that can be injected. And again, I'm going to refer you back to Frank's article on durable writing. It's absolutely crucial for how you put your content together. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap up a bit. We're going to talk about the things that kind of if we had to draw principles around what Kevin and I were talking about, we came up with 5. Some of these would be quite obvious. AI will not fix bad content strategy or governance. It will simply amplify it. I maintain that AI is really a magnifying glass. If you're a developer using AI and you're a bad developer, AI will make you worse. If you're a good developer, AI will make you better. And the same is true of your content. If your content is bad, AI is just going to make it worse. If your content's good, AI is going to make it better. AI cannot, and you do not want it to, make up answers. The answers must exist. If somebody is looking for something on your intranet, it has to be there. If it's not there, best case AI will say, I don't know. Worst case, it'll make up an answer. So watch your search metrics. What are people searching for? What information do they want to find? Make sure that content exists. For AI to use it, it has to exist. Find out how your AI engine configures its RAG, its retrieval augmented generation. Ask somebody in your organization, how does it chunk content? How can I write content in such a way that can fit into the smaller chunks that our RAG engine injects into prompts? You might be surprised what they tell you. In terms of content writing, concentrate on content with strong, clear, and simple messages. AI doesn't love flowery language. It may output flowery language. It doesn't like that as an input. So concentrate on facts. Your content should be a collection of facts in smaller units that can be mixed and matched. And then finally, strive to make each content fact individually addressable. Content engines like to cite resources. They like to say, I got this piece of information from here, and I got this piece of information from here. Make sure it can cite resources individually. Here's the great news. I'm going to finish with this. I believe, and Kevin believes, that content still wins. I maintain off to the right is my incredibly wildly unscientific graph. But in this graph, I'm making the point that good content is still 65, 70% of the battle. It really is. If you have good content, you're doing really well. The next part is structure. If your content is structured well, if you have it as a collection of facts in smaller units, that's another big part. At the very top, there's a small amount, 10% might be how your AI is configured and specific parameters of your AI. But everybody thinks that orange part, they can completely change and fix bad content, and you can't. The blue part at the bottom, that's your base. That has to be good. And that's it. And we nailed the time. I'm so proud of that. We finished right on time. I've included our email addresses here. Kevin and I are not hard guys to find. We love talking about this stuff. If you have a question about anything that either of us said during this presentation, we would absolutely love to hear from you.